Hello there, welcome to our Banyan Chat series. And today I am delighted and honored to welcome a senior academic from the UK, Dr. Kerry Brown. She's broadly in the area of food sciences. By training, she is a scientist or has had training in sciences, but now works on the interdisciplinary field of sociology and food systems, public food systems, and food policy. She's currently at the University of Exeter and also at the London School for Tropical Hygiene and Food Systems. Yeah.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine.
Hygiene and Tropical Medicine.
It is far too long.
So welcome to Gokhale Institute. As you know, this is a university. It's a small university, but we are almost 100 years old. We are mostly focused on economics and allied disciplines, including demographies and population science, agriculture, entrepreneurship, and so on. We do have actually a very strong agriculture economics research center, which is 70 years old. And in that, we look at food systems. So I want to begin by asking you, how did a scientist get interested in food policy, and what exactly is food policy?
Well, firstly, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And in terms of getting into food policy, like you said, my background is very much biology, but I'm very much interested in the relationship between food and health. And whenever I've done any work looking at health outcomes associated with food, you can't get away from the fact that food is central to culture, to people, to how people live in society. So a lot of the work that I have done has been trying to pull those two pieces of work together. So look at the biological, kind of biomedical side of food, but also the economics, how food is seen in society, and also very much I've been looking at sustainability as well in terms of food and the environment.
So food policy, is that about government policy regarding adequate nutrition and food security, or is it also about sustainability and making sure environmental impact of agricultural practices are not adverse?
Great question, and I think it's all of the above. So I've done some work with some colleagues here in India, actually mapping the food policies in the central government. And it spans all sorts of departments because it all depends how you look at food, whether you look at it from health, for nutrition, whether you look at it from trade as a commodity, whether you look at it from agriculture in terms of livelihoods, or whether you're looking at it environmentally in terms of its sustainability impact, or food security in terms of droughts and irregular weather patterns.
In fact, you are in India at a very interesting time because just recently we had the annual ranking, international ranking published called the World Hunger Index. It's published by two non-government organizations, one from, I think, Ireland, one from Germany, but they've been doing it for the last many, many years. And India's ranking in the global, order is quite low. I think it's some 120 or something out of one. So people are very upset because there is a perception that India doesn't really suffer from hunger as much as nutritional deficiency. I thought it sounds like hair splitting, but I don't want you to get into any political controversy. But is there a difference between nutrition and hunger? I mean, I'm sure there's, but is it serious that it makes a big difference?
Probably yes and no, if I understand your question correctly. I think you can have sufficient food to prevent hunger, but the quality of that food might not be good enough or adequate enough to give you adequate nutrition. So you might have enough calories, but you might not have a good quality diet, which means that all of your body functions and development and growth are as they should be.
So it's the balance of micronutrients and so on.
Yeah.
So what is it that prevents, let's say, a society or an economy which seems to have adequate production of food grain or animal products, poultry, milk, eggs, and yet have micronutrient imbalances or deficiencies in, nutrients and malnourishment? What is it? What prevents these outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, it happens in every country. This is not just a problem in India, but a lot of it is equity. So it's making sure that the quality of the diets and everybody has access to food at a sufficient quality at every level of society. I mean, we also see problems of people moving in and out of food security. So if their food is not stable, They can be food insecure for a short time, and then they might have a bumper harvest, and they might have food that's plentiful. So a lot of that influences their status.
So that's where the economics comes in. I mean, one is struck by the fact that poor people eat fast food and rich people eat organic food. I don't know how it is in India versus the rest. The caricature is that in developing countries, the poor people are very thin, and in the rich countries, the poor people are very obese. Is that a fair caricature, or?
Yes, probably. Although I think it changes, and I think you can see that in some cultures where they're eating a lot of convenience foods, which might not be nutrient rich, that you have problems with overnutrition. But there's also a problem if you start undernutrition. So if you start from quite a poor diet and then all of a sudden that you're eating a lot, there's tricky kind of that history of your status of what you've had previously can definitely influence your risk of health outcomes later on. So diabetes is quite a good one.
Oh yeah. I mean, India has a very serious problem of diabetes, but that's also related to not necessarily food being cheap, because that's I think that's what you said, that they tend to eat the cheaper food or more inexpensive, but that tends to be not so healthy. But in India, I think it's the whole balance of carbohydrates and so on. Is this something that food policy should be concerned with? After all, people are making choices. So how much should the government be telling you what to eat and what not to eat? Do you believe this approach, in this approach?
I do. I believe that everybody has their own food choices, but there are larger drivers of food choices, and there are some structural things that perhaps we could change to make it easier for people to make healthier choices. Ultra processed foods is a good one. The fact that a lot of food industry now have banned trans fats, that was quite a straightforward systemic change that I think food industry embraced.
So you would support things like food safety labeling and compulsory complying with food safety regulation?
I think having a safe food supply chain is something that probably everybody would want. But you have to pick the level of regulation, I think, that's manageable.
But if you are sort of a market fundamentalist, you think too much regulation and nosy inspectors are more trouble than...
Yeah, maybe. But we do have problems with undernutrition and overnutrition, and whatever we're doing at the moment, it's not working. So perhaps we need to think about a few different approaches.
You see, India has a huge challenge of increasing the per capita income of its people, because it's the third largest economy in the world in terms of aggregate GDP, because there's so many people. But in terms of per capita income, it's barely $2,000 or $3,000. And we keep looking at how you can increase income, livelihoods, wages. And one of the big areas actually is agro-processing. That is agriculture, food into slightly, industry where people, it's employment, but also, so for example, street food.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's highly unregulated, and maybe you would call it unsafe.
Well, it all depends how you define unsafe, doesn't it? And if lots of people are becoming ill in certain hotspots, then epidemiology would tell you that perhaps it was unsafe. But if the food's being prepared in an adequate way, oil's not being reused repeatedly, maybe, then it probably is safe if those that are producing it and the food that they're sourcing is safe in the first place. Street food's a big part of every culture. I would be so disappointed if we lost street vendors.
Some people think that if you, Indian street food gives you a lot of immunity. But
maybe
you become immune from other diseases. We want to wrap up. I know this is a very casual conversation, but one thing quickly I want to ask you is about one of your research was on the Bedouin, the perception of some zoonotic disease risk among the Bedouins. So you went to the desert and talked to the Bedouins?
Well, I didn't do that myself. I helped design the protocol and analyze the data, because the Bedouin community is it is such a particular community. We had people who live in that community and work in that community that did all of the data collection. And we used photos to elicit interviews. and it was all about what camels meant to them and how open they were to veterinary help or trying to develop some interventions to minimize transfer
what
of
was the main
zoonotic
finding?
disease. We had three kind of main findings in terms of the value of camels to these communities, and it's now going to help us design an intervention to improve zoonotic disease risk in those communities. So rather than imposing an intervention on this community, they are helping us to design it so it works for them.
Okay. So anyway, as we wrap up, what do you think? One of the objectives of these sustainable development goals, I think, is to remove hunger. What do you think are 2 or 3 key? I know it's not an easy question, but not a magic bullet. But 2 or 3 since you've been coming to India, what are the 2 or 3 high priority policy interventions that our governments should focus on?
Yeah, I mean, that is a very tough question, and I would not like to, as I'm not Indian, say what the Indian government should do. But the SDGs are all about equity, about the environment, and about health, and having all 3 of those as priorities. And from the work that I've seen in India and elsewhere, trying to bring policy together in all 3 of those areas, so that food policy is fair, it's looking at health, and it's looking at sustainability all at the same time, is very challenging, but I think a worthwhile endeavour to bring it all together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kerry Brown. It's a delight to host you. And please come again and spend more time so we can have a series of maybe lectures. So welcome. Thank you.
I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you.